Kareem and Heather, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
So one of the things I want us to talk about is this organization IPAAQ and sort of what you all are doing. Can you start by just giving us a open the hood, so to speak, and let us hear a little bit about what you all are doing?
So, Kareem, I don't know if you want to jump in. I can definitely tell you IPAAQ stands for Illinois Providers for ABA Access and Quality. And we are a new group in Illinois that's representing organizations. And we have particular issues we're working on now, but we're also looking to work on a variety of issues over time that will improve ABA access, that will improve quality of care, and will hopefully improve funder reimbursement as well.
Another big thing that IPAAQ is focusing on is creating a collaborative community of providers. So having different kinds of organizations get into one group that's able to discuss various potential issues with legislation or any kind of payer issues that we have with being in the state of Illinois particularly. I've seen from the first couple of months that IPAAQ has been launched, there has been a tremendous amount of collaboration between large organizations, small organizations, mid-sized organizations that has really helped create that community piece so then we can better service our families and provide that high quality therapy that Heather was speaking about. And Illinois at the moment is a very complex landscape with legislation, with payer rates. So IPAAQ is definitely trying to gear up to try and advocate for certain things that will improve the quality of care that the community is providing to the autism community as a whole.
Beautiful. Thank you both for that. Heather, I want to start with you for this first question. And I think this is something you both mentioned, this concept of ABA access and some of the challenges that are happening sort of within Illinois and really across the nation at this point, but really focusing on Illinois for the moment. Heather, what are some of when you think about ABA access, what comes to mind and what are some of the barriers?
I think there's several factors that impact families' ability to access ABA. One of those, of course, being just supply and demand of providers to deliver these services. There are not enough BCBAs. There are not enough behavior technicians or registered behavior technicians. And so, unfortunately, there are just far more families seeking services than there are providers who can deliver these services. And I would say that's probably one of the largest factors. Then, of course, there's coverage to make sure that it's affordable for families. There can be high out-of-pockets or deductibles that could impact them. And then also time of day. Families whose children are in school and who are looking for after-school hours tend to face even more of a bottleneck of a wait list. So I think there's a lot of things that hopefully we can work on as a field and improve over time.
I feel like that supply and demand piece has been sort of a conversation for the last 20 plus years of my career, and the next 20 plus years of my career will be. I think there's a lot of work to be done on that. But what are some of the challenges that you are seeing specifically with the supply and demand, and also with some of the legislation that's pending and how that's limiting access?
So definitely, I think even though more BCBAs are passing the exam each year, as we know, there are more kids with autism being diagnosed each year as well. And many individuals with autism require our services for years at a time before they're able to fade or move on to less intensive services. And so even with more professionals entering the field, that does create, again, a backup where we just need more. We need more of them. I think there's a lot of barriers. It's a master's degree. There's fieldwork experience. All healthcare jobs are not paid equivalent to what we think they should be paid.
Right.
And so being able to attract people into this field and maintain them into this field, I think are also considerations. And then in Illinois, in particular, when you add on top of that the recent BCBA licensure law and the corporate practice of medicine restrictions that were inherent in that law, that can also create some more access issues down the line as well.
I want to talk about that, but in a minute, because I feel like that whole thing is there's a lot to unpack there. Can we come back to that? Is that okay, Heather?
Absolutely.
Great. And certainly either one of you feel free to chime in on either of these questions. I want this to be an open discussion. I'll just kind of ping pong back and forth, if that's okay. Excuse me, Karem, there was something that you mentioned that I think is also important when we're talking about access, and that's the quality of care. It's not just about making sure that people can get access to care. It's making sure that care is of quality, right? And it's not just, you can certainly give a lot of people a lot of access, but if it's not helping and it's not beneficial and it's not in line with what the expectations are, that's not a good thing either. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the standards of quality of care that you were referencing?
Absolutely. So there are a few things that Heather mentioned earlier about the bottleneck effect, right? So having the constant rising rates in autism diagnosis, and although there are more and more certificates passing the BCBA exam, passing the RBT exam to be able to provide these services, the timeline is just placing a lot of pressure on certain providers with the supply and demand, right? There's such little supply for such high demand for services. Therefore, we're finding ourselves having to speed up to offer people very time-sensitive and life-changing therapy. Evidence shows us that ABA, the sooner it's given, the more effective it can be. Therefore, we have to all come together as a field and make these decisions. As far as quality is concerned, there are various barriers that are put in place at the moment that impact our quality. The biggest one, from my perspective, would be the reimbursement rates. We aren't able to attract high quality talent and high quality of services through these clinicians if we're not able to offer them a valuable living wage, especially on the frontline level. So paraprofessionals, direct support professionals, RBTs, or anybody in the service industry that works on the front lines, at the moment, the industry is not compensating them enough. Therefore, if we're fighting for that quality, we need to be able to make sure that these people that are working with our children and our teens and adults on the autism spectrum are able to earn a valuable annual income. Unfortunately, providers are not able to do so with limited budgets and limited reimbursement rates.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm just thinking, like, who all needs to hear about that, right? The parents need to know about that, right? The technicians need to know about that. The behavior analysts need to know about that. This concept of making sure that we've got the appropriate reimbursement rate is a very important one for the entire community to be aware of. Would you agree, Heather? You're shaking your head. Yes, it seems like you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think, one of the other factors is there's no law or rule on when insurance reviews their rates. And so we also get into situations where the reimbursement rate may remain stagnant for really staggering periods of time. It could be 8, 10 years between increases, or over that course of time, you might get increases of 2%. We know cost of living goes up more than that. We know people, if we have good retention, people who are here year over year, they want their rates to go up more than that. Insurance companies have all the power. It's really hard to negotiate with them. And so I think, that's another barrier to it, is that there's really no requirement for them to review or raise their rates on any given timeline or by any given amount.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yes, it's a big problem.
Yeah. So I imagine part of the ways to combat that is back to something that Karem, you had mentioned sort of at the top of the episode, which is this collaborative community where people can come together and talk about this and how this impacts not just the families but the technicians and also the organizations. Can you talk about some of that collaboration that's happening from IPAAQ?
So without IPAAQ, I wouldn't have been able to come into contact with. I first of all want to thank the board. The board has been extremely collaborative, and we've all kind of worn multiple hats in the first couple of months to get this organization launched. As along with getting the word out to other providers, like, hey, we're here, we exist, we're here to help you. Let's put our hands together and collaborate. Um, but we're in some people's eyes, we might all be competitors. We're all trying to fight for the same thing, right? We're all trying to establish stronger organizations. We're trying to establish a strong referral network for the families that we can't accommodate. So then we ensure that the community has access to these services. At the same time, we're trying to get together and discuss these statewide issues that put limitations and burdens on us for operating our practices, regardless of the size, right? So when Heather mentioned the Behavior Analyst Licensure Act, the biggest section in there would be ownership. We all come from very different ownership structures. I'm a small business owner, independently owned. Some other providers may be BCBA owned, or another kind of clinician that is involved in the ownership. Now that the state has come up with that decision, there's more limitation on who can and cannot operate these practices. Therefore, the access piece of it, if we don't all come together and show legislators and show the community that there is a need for this to change, we're not going to be able to make much of a difference for the families at hand, right?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? I mean, getting everybody together. I think a lot of people just from the outside looking in say, "Oh, you're all competing for the same clients." And to your point, Kareem, no, we're all cooperating and trying to support the same clients. And I think that's a different mindset and a different viewpoint.
Absolutely. And I mean, my practice, we do have a pretty large wait list that we cannot immediately accommodate for, due to that supply and demand concept that we discussed earlier. So I would much rather have the ability to collaborate with Heather's practice and refer clients back and forth within a reasonable geographical area than to just have these clients waiting for months or sometimes years on end to get access to these very time sensitive, life changing services. So that piece of it too has really helped bridge that gap of, we're not competing, we're collaborating.
I like that. Heather, were you going to add to that, Heather?
No, I think Kareem summed it up the best. It's really all about collaboration, even among people that seem to be competitors. We're all impacted by the same issues.
Right. You both have mentioned this piece of legislation, and so I'm ready for it. I'm ready for the corporate practice of medicine. I'm ready for the summary, Heather. Can you tell us a little bit the licensure law that is pending or is passed? Passed, excuse me. So the licensure law that passed and some of the barriers that it presents to the community.
Absolutely. So first off, licensure is really not what's presenting the issue. Having licensed behavior analysts creates a higher level of oversight and monitoring. But the issue that we're working on is that within this licensure law that stipulates that BCBAs must be licensed by the state is a section that includes language related to what's called the corporate practice of medicine. And so this language states that a practice that is providing applied behavior analysis services must be owned by a licensed clinician. And not just any licensed clinician, but a licensed BCBA. And so that creates a lot of issues because many companies currently in operation today are not owned by a licensed BCBA, or at least not fully owned by one. And if we are not able to change this portion of the licensure law, it would require many companies. So this would be impacting thousands of families in Illinois, thousands of employees in Illinois who work for these companies, to reorganize their structure which might cause some of them to have to close down and cease operations, but also just diverts attention, funds, effort away from our clients and our staff. I'm sure Kareem would agree. I would rather focus our money on further supporting our team and our clients and resources for them than on lawyers' fees to reorganize the business. And I'd rather make sure that we buyer side sees over 400 clients in Illinois, and we really want to make sure that those services don't get disrupted and that these families continue to have consistent access to care.
Yeah, it seems like that was some verbiage that I don't know if that was intentional or not. I don't know if that was by design or not. I wasn't part of that process, but it seems like that's one of those things that just the nature of it is going to create some of the problems you all are trying to combat, right? It's going to minimize access. It's going to lower the quality potentially, because now instead of people focusing on how to implement staff trainings and update and make sure families are getting the services that they need and make sure that they're onboarding clients and getting everything that they need so that they can get started, now they're worrying about the corporate structure, to your point, right? And that's not
Exactly.
part of what we need to be addressing as a community. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You did mention that there were some good things in there, right? Some increases in monitoring and oversight. Can you tell us a little bit about those and the licensure that and what that would require?
Absolutely. Being licensed by the state puts BCBAs kind of under the oversight of IDFPR. And so, what that allows is more protection for consumers to be able to have a place to report if they do feel that unethical practices are happening. And that gives the state some jurisdiction over investigating that and applying potential consequences if they find that there are violations or unethical practices going on.
And then, Kareem, from your perspective, from a small business perspective, um, how do you get this information? How did you find out that this law was pending and passed? How did you find out and interpret, how it was going to impact you and your daily operations?
From my experience, I've always been very involved with the local industry, and I've made it a point to be in pretty much every conversation I possibly could be, to make sure that my business is not only protected but also representing the large community of small business owners that I'm hoping to stand up for. Although I do see that there are some issues where small business owners do not know that this is a thing, right? They
Yeah.
don't know that the state has already passed this, that it's already written into law, and that IPAAQ and various lobbying efforts are trying to essentially reverse, or change or modify to help this language loosen up and not impact the access and quality that we're trying to stand for. Um, Therefore, I heavily want to encourage small business owners to get out there, get educated, reach out to us, and reach out to other people in the field locally that are familiar with these things, because this is essentially going to impact everybody in some capacity.
Yeah, Kareem, let's stay there for just a minute, right? I feel like a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't have time for that. That's happening over there," and they kind of keep everything at arm's length, right? And it's just so easy to sort of turn a blind eye to what's happening. But how can people get involved, right? I mean, this is not the how can they be a part of this process?
I think the biggest thing that we need to focus on is changing the narrative of, like we spoke about earlier, competition versus collaboration. Once people have that idea that collaboration is the bridge to quality, and the bridge to better servicing the community that we all take an oath to service with the highest level of care, they're able to change their mindset about whether or not they would like to get involved in these efforts. Just because a business owner is a licensed clinician, and that this wouldn't essentially be a complete disruption for them, doesn't mean that this is not going to impact the network itself, right? When funders create
Great
networks,
point.
we're all part of the network together. trying to service the beneficiaries under those insurance plans. We all need to. Part of all of our contracts is being able to refer to another in-network provider, right? So the way for people to get involved, from my perspective, is don't be afraid of having conversations. And I've had the best conversations as a young, very, very young and starter business owner, with big people in the field that I've been able to connect with, not only personally but professionally. And all of this has tremendously helped my practice to not only gain the visibility but also the credibility. Right, I've been able to bounce ideas back and forth on operations, on even certain things like employment. Right, how do we better structure our employment for clinicians in the field, so then we can open up more opportunities for these families that are on all of our wait lists, essentially. So people that are trying to get involved in this effort specifically, even if it doesn't cause the level of disruption that it will cause others, it's important that we all support each other. And think of each other as a community versus a long list of competitors.
Right.
Mm.
Heather, for people to get involved in IPAAQ, what do they need to be doing?
Well, it's really simple. IPAAQ is on social media. We're on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn. We also have a website. And so by reaching out to either any of the individual board members or connecting with us on social media as well, we'd be happy to have conversations, make sure that any other providers are well versed in the issues that we're working on. We're happy to have people join us at a meeting, before officially joining, just to see who we are, what we're talking about. I think, just like Karem said, it's about collaboration and it's about getting as many providers as possible so that we have wide representation. IPAAQ really prioritizes the voice of our members. And so the directions that we go in and the initiatives that we work on are going to be based on what do our members want to do. It's not just based on the few voices of the board who are just leading that and steering that. And so whatever matters in this field, we want to hear about that from providers, and we want to be able to pool our collective resources and our collective voices to work on that together.
That's great. I want to go back to something real quick. I'm sorry, we're going to go a little out of order. You mentioned that you were trying to combat some of this legislation and correct some of the verbiage in this law that just passed. What does that process look like? That I can't imagine that that's just an email to an inbox somewhere. That's a long, arduous process.
It is a long process. We do have a lobbyist team that we're working with. And what we're really trying to do is amend the language to state that anyone in an organization that's providing ABA services who is directly overseeing or making decisions regarding clinical treatment must be a licensed behavior analyst. So what that would do is would still protect quality. It would still ensure that the person who is making those clinical policies and procedures does have the necessary background and education to do that, but while also giving some flexibility for the actual ownership structure.
Mm. That's great. That's great. Thank you both. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure that you share with us before our time is up today?
I would like to quickly mention the just one of the biggest reasons why we're all coming together and trying to fight this is mainly just because if we take our clinicians out of the treatment rooms, we're hurting the supply and demand problem, right? We're making it worse, and this law is essentially telling BCBAs and licensed behavior analysts to run these businesses, to sit down and look at spreadsheets all day versus creating treatment plans for the various number of children in Illinois that are seeking services, right? they're running payroll, they are coming up with business plans, they're talking to vendors, they're, you know what I mean? That would take them out of direction for that piece of quality of care and access to care. So these are the biggest kinds of concerns that the general members, the board members, and everybody from various different organizational structures is having, right? Well, we have a BCBA that is no longer able to service that list of clients that are waiting for services and having to run our payroll or pay our bills. So it's very, very difficult to think of it that way. That this is essentially reality now, and we have to all come together and reverse or appeal or trying to find a win-win solution that would protect the consumer and protect the industry, at the same time keep the ability for us to meet that demand for services.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Kareem. I mean, the more that clinicians have to say yes to, that also means the more they have to say no to. And when they're having to say no to providing services to individuals and their families, and yes to payroll and spreadsheets and signing on Costco deliveries and things of that nature, then that just means they don't have time for the other. And I don't think that's the intent of the community at this moment.
I think the other thing I'd like to add is one of the side effects of the corporate practice of medicine language as it is written is that who it's really going to hurt are those smaller providers that are not backed by private equity. So, for example, both Kareem and I work for companies that are self-funded, and I don't think there's anything wrong with private equity. I think just like everyone else, there's good examples of that and less good examples of that. But at the end of the day, the companies that are backed by private equity are probably most likely to have the funds to be able to reorganize and get into the ownership structure that this particular law would require. It's smaller companies that don't have those deep pockets behind them, that are owned by, their single owner like Kareem or like the company that I work for, that potentially may struggle more with that change. And I think that all providers, no matter the size or the ownership structure, can bring value and bring different viewpoints and perspectives into the field. And I would hate to shut that avenue down.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that perspective. That's not something I had really considered, but I mean, you're absolutely right. The cost alone for some of what we're talking about is going to be prohibitive. Again, it's already hard enough. There's already enough mountains to climb uphill. We don't need to make more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to choose between, if we have to put aside hundreds of thousands of dollars to reorganize, when that could have been money that I budgeted next year for, again, staff training or materials, resources, things of that nature. I'd much rather take that money and spend it on the clients and the team.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to say, I want to appreciate both of you for a second and just the work that IPAAQ is doing. And I understand the intention behind some of these legislations, and I understand what they're trying to do, and it doesn't always happen. Like the implementation doesn't always match. So I just appreciate each of you and your resources and your communities advocating on behalf of really the families and the providers. And I just think that's so important. And I just hope we can continue to do that and do that in a variety of ways. So thank you.
Thank you for having us on.
Very much.